Welcome to episode 3 of the Due North Sports Podcast. I'm Austin Schumacher here with my good buddy Alex Shanilak.
What's up?
We got a lot to get to today. We've got some Vikings talk, wrapping up the Wolves season, and we just got through the Western Eastern Conference Finals. Of course, OKC and the Spurs had a great series. It went 7, very entertaining with the Spurs eking it out. And now we got a Knicks-Spurs matchup in the finals. Who you got, Alex?
I think it's going to be a better series than people think. The Knicks have sort of been on a tear since losing a couple games to the Hawks in the first round. The West is a gauntlet. I think more than anything that OKC San Antonio series showed us how much better those two teams are than everybody else in the West, including our beloved Minnesota Timberwolves. I think I still have to give the slight edge to the Spurs, but I think this goes 6 or 7, and I think the Knicks keep it interesting. Who are you rooting for?
I think I got to say I'm rooting for Cat. I'd like to see him win, just with him being with the Wolves for so long, and still hold a little bit of resentment towards the Spurs after they beat us in the second round. How about you?
That's fair. I talked on the previous episode of this podcast about how I liked the Spurs from afar all season long, and then while we were playing them, absolutely despised them. But watching them play the Thunder, I was reminded how much I hate the Thunder, and I love Wemby. Dylan Harper is going to be an amazing player. He's already an amazing player. I kind of like their whole team. Steph Castle's awesome. So outside of Cat, I'm not a big Brunson guy. I'd love to see Cat win a title, but I'm kind of pulling for the Spurs. It's kind of a win-win because if the Spurs win, I'd be happy for Wemby and that whole team. I like the way they operate. If the Knicks win, I'd be happy for our boy Cat. Do you think if the Knicks won that we would get a similar shout out to Minnesota from Cat as we got from Kevin Garnett when the Boston Celtics won? You remember anything is possible, and he said this one's for everyone back in soda.
Well, that's good enough reason to root for the Knicks right there, just for the possible shout out. That's about as close as we can get.
Cat has been he's been quoted several times in press conferences and interviews about how he during the playoffs even he was locked in watching the Wolves. So he's our guy. He remains our guy. Happy for him to be where he's at, and I'm rooting for good basketball. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's get into some Vikings talk. So, of course, the big news this week, the Vikings finally hired a GM, Nolan Teasley from the Seattle Seahawks, assistant GM, I believe. Obviously, Seahawks have been very successful over the last decade with him with the team. Of course, they built 2 Super Bowl winning rosters with completely different players. Kind of the first organization to do that. And, I think he was a sport, especially towards the latter part of that, was a big part of it. And the Seahawks, of course, have kind of shown how to build a roster the right way through the draft. They're absolutely loaded with young talent and on cheap rookie deals, but also sprinkle in some key signings there with like Leonard Williams, of course, Sam Darnold. And so I think he was the right candidate. I'm really glad that they chose somebody outside of the organization. We need some fresh blood. We need some fresh eyes on the situation. We still have a good roster, but it's aging. It's expensive. Of course, the Vikings have missed like no other team in the draft in recent years, which partially led to the firing of Kwesi. So there's a lot to go on there. I think it's good that Teasley has a scouting background, which I really like.
Absolutely.
Kind of like Rick Spielman did, I think that was kind of a big problem with Kwesi, where he was supposed to be all analytics and didn't really have a scouting background, and maybe that kind of hurt them in the draft in these previous few seasons. But the only thing that I did not like, Alex, is this new triangle of authority, which is not new, it's old. The triangle of authority. So with Bob Brzezinski, head coach, KOC, and now Nolan Teasley. Um, what was your kind of thought on the Teasley hiring?
Well, I agree largely with what you said, and for a bigger, especially the going outside of the organization, I think there was, at least to those of us not in the know, there was some thought, and depending on how you look at it, fear that they were just going to give Brzezinski the full time job as GM, and not to say anything against him, he's been described as our cap guru for a long time, and he's been the facilitator of, part of the reason, given that their poor drafting, part of the reason they've been able to remain competitive, at least on kind of an every other year basis, is some of the gymnastics that he was able to pull off with, converting dollars to signing bonuses, and adding dead years to the end, and all these maneuvers that he does. But I think if they had gone that direction, it would have really left. It would have felt like a power vacuum in some way, and it would have, I think, felt like Kevin O'Connell would have what I would think is too much power in the organization, and that may still be the case. And it remains to be seen how this new triangle of authority is going to operate. But when we've seen that in the past, it can work well when it's working. When it's not working, it ends poorly. And we saw that for sure with the end of the Rick Spielman, Mike Zimmer era. So having said all that, it's hard to know the details of any of these outside hire candidates. I mean, you can look at the resumes. Sometimes they're guys that, unless you're really locked in, you haven't necessarily heard of before. The pedigree that the what is it Nolan Teasley has coming from Seattle is great. You love that. You love that he appears to be coming from the scouting world. I heard the anecdote that he, as an intern, or he emailed all 32 teams, or he sent letters to all 32 teams, and the only guy that responded was the Seahawks GM, and he started there as an intern and grew to be the assistant GM, and really that's one of the model organizations in the league. So to get a guy from there, you're excited about, but the jury's out on what the performance is going to be. But can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on? I mean, they almost explicitly brought up the idea of this triangle again, and I think to a certain subset of Vikings fans, that makes us a little bit nervous given the history there. So what do you think about what that means, that the ownership is sort of publicly putting it out there that there's this triangle? They didn't use those words, but they said essentially these three guys are running things.
Yeah. What I've heard, it's kind of a unique situation league wide, where most teams, there's a few teams, like I believe Andy Reid's kind of the head guy with the Chiefs. It kind of has final say. There's a few teams with the coach that kind of has that authority, but most teams, 90% of teams, the GM has final say, and for good reason. I don't buy into this triangle of authority. I think you need to have a guy up at the top that can make these decisions, because I think it can lead to bad decisions when you have three guys trying to come to a consensus. I mean, I think it can lead to a decision like moving off of Sam Darnold and going with JJ McCarthy. If one guy has to answer for something like that, then I think there's more accountability to not make those kind of bad decisions. So I'm not a huge fan. I think he's the right candidate, but it's the wrong structure. And they've apparently, this structure goes back to the late 2000s with um, Brad Childress and Rick Spielman and Rob Brzezinski again. And I know he is kind of the cap guru, and I like keeping him in the fold, but I don't understand why he needs to be a part of the consensus when you're making a big decision for the franchise.
Right. And I think it sort of gets into this it's a chicken or egg thing, or it's almost like so they had the fallout of the Spielman Zimmer era that led them to abandon the triangle, as it were, and they hired Kwesi, who is an analytics guy. Kwesi was part of the process to hire Kevin O'Connell, and those two, I mean, Brzezinski's there in the background the whole time, but I think since 2022, when Kwesi and KOC came into the fold, it's sort of been the Kevin O'Connell show in a lot of ways. And
yeah,
and I think it's borne out in the fact that he still has a job and Kwesi doesn't. But what I was going to say was, when you look at what some of the model organizations are, the successful organizations, they have a strong GM that's been there a long time. You think of or that like the average fan knows their name. You think of like Howie Roseman with the Eagles, or Eric DeCosta with the Ravens, who I think has been there the entire time that franchise has existed, or John Lynch with the 49ers. And obviously they've got a good coach too, but you sort of, that GM position, when it's working well, I think the expectation is they're not as tied to the tides of winning and losing as the coach is.
correct.
They're going to survive
view.
more than one coach. They're taking the long view. And the Vikings have been in this really since, I would say, the Zimmer Spielman, the way that era ended sort of blew things up, because Spielman could have been that guy, but things got so bad between them at the end that it made that not a possibility. But when the head coach becomes the most powerful person in the organization, I think it can create some problems, because the GM, especially to be a GM coming into a situation where you've got this existing head coach, he's been there for, now this will be his 5th season. It's a little much to where do you fit in? Are you in charge, or are you walking on eggshells because of what Kevin O'Connell says? And then you've got this cap wizard over here, who I think you treat him as a tool and intelligence to help you out. But if you're Teasley coming in, that's got to be a daunting proposition. And
it's also a weird dynamic that Brzezinski was a candidate for the GM job.
Yes.
And he didn't get it, yet he's still involved in this triangle structure of power.
And how does he feel about that? Is he
correct.
upset? Is he resentful? And does that just plant a bad seed to start?
That leads to dysfunction down the road.
And so, like you said, I think it was the right hire, but it's an interesting structure. And not only that, but I would argue that if we're talking about a triangle of authority for the Minnesota Vikings, that the third piece is not Rob Brzezinski. It needs to be Brian Flores.
Yeah.
Because Brian Flores, my understanding is that since he's been here, he's had a pretty large say in the personnel decisions on the defensive side of the ball. And maybe that's still the case. I think on balance, he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. He probably should be a head coach. We're blessed and lucky to still have him. I think we might have him for a while, because his lawsuit against the league is ongoing and widening. and that's probably the only reason he's still here. But
Yeah.
where he's not brought up explicitly in that triangle, but he exists too. And so if you're the new GM coming in, you all not only do you have to deal with the KOC thing and Rob Brzezinski, who's been here forever, but Brian Flores also has a lot of power in the organization because I think, when Kwesi was fired, Brzezinski's the acting GM, but I have to imagine that Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores were heavily involved in the decisions that were being made in terms of free agency and the draft. And so how those power dynamics play out is going to be very interesting because football is an ego-driven sport and it's an ego-driven business. And I it's going to be very interesting, and I hope it goes well. But it could crash and burn and be be a retread of some of those press conferences at the end of the Mike Zimmer, Rick Spielman era where get your popcorn ready.
Yeah. Do you think KOC survives a season where they don't make the playoffs? Like the Kyler Murray thing doesn't really work out. Maybe they bring in McCarthy halfway through the season. He doesn't really succeed. They go 7-10. Do you think he has a job next year?
It's an interesting question. I think if you were going to answer that question, yes, then in that world, he's already out of a job. I think they would have cleaned house. I think the Wilfs have a lot of trust in him, and so he's built enough goodwill with them, if not with fans and the public, that I think he can survive another down year. Especially, I mean, we're not privy to what the conversations are behind closed doors, but if Kwesi was the one driving the JJ McCarthy ship and KOC wanted either Darnold or Rodgers or some other option, Drake May is I think really who he wanted, and they couldn't make it happen. But he's built some distance between himself and JJ McCarthy, I think, already. So unless it was a spectacular, if they go 3-14, that's a different story. But if they're 7+ wins, I think maybe he's on the hot seat next season. But I think he's got at least 2 more years left. I think that there's some runway there. He's gathered a lot of power, is how I would look at it.
But I mean, don't you think that's a little bit more leash than he deserves, just in terms of, I know he technically hasn't had an established long-term starter since they didn't bring back Darnold, but of course he won Coach of the Year award in 2024 and well-deserved, but he still has not won a game in the playoffs. And his offensive ratings, he has a good offense, but it's never like they're a top 5 offense in the league. And then last year, boy, it seemed like they relied more on the defense than the offense. I mean, I know they had quarterback issues, but don't you think he's gotten more leash than he probably deserves? I mean, there's an argument he could be the most overrated coach in the NFL. And I like KOC a lot. I think that's why the Wilfs like him so much. It's just like, he is the prototypical guy you want leading your organization. He says all the right things. The players seem to love him, but it's like, dude, where's the success in the postseason? Like, that's what we need to see here. And if you're the quarterback whisperer, like, why did we go with McCarthy in the first place? I mean, from all accounts, he's just a disaster. And it's like, how were you even in on him to begin with, And it's interesting. Maybe Kwesi was kind of driving that ship, but that's never leaked out, If you say one thing about the organization, they've kept that very tight-lipped on who was really behind moving on from Sam Darnold and going to McCarthy. And maybe it hasn't leaked out because they were all in on it. And if they are, they all should have been fired because it was just a disastrous uh, decision to make. So
Yeah,
I
and
don't know.
yeah,
I'm
we're
I'm
left to read the tea leaves, or the backward looking tea leaves, I guess, the publicly available information, and read between the lines. Um, I've said this before on here, but I think the fact that he still has a job and Kwesi doesn't, you can take some, you can draw some conclusions from that. The fact, I mean, we're probably going to get into the quarterback battle more specifically in a bit, but the fact that they even brought in Kyler Murray, or a Kyler Murray type, this, and you could put, this would be similar to, well, Kyler Murray, I would argue Kyler Murray has a higher pedigree right now than Sam Darnold did when prior to coming to the Vikings. Um, it's similar, but it's similar to the Darnold thing, or Geno, or Baker Mayfield, or these guys, kind of the the second opportunity for high pedigree draft picks. Um, the fact that he's brought in at all, regardless of what happens from here on out, is a vote of no confidence in some way in JJ McCarthy, which means to me the fact that he's still in the building and Kwesi's not, that uh, either Kwesi was driving the ship, or KOC was able to make ownership think that Kwesi was driving the ship on that.
yeah.
But you bring up, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. He probably has too much rope. He was supposed to be this offensive guru coming from the Rams, coming from Sean McVay. Last year's a weird year to use because, they're dealing with a rookie quarterback, but they were 28th in expected points added by offense last year. I don't have the season by season statistics with me. I put them together a little bit earlier. I don't have them in front of me, but I believe, like on average, they've been like 14th. I think his best offensive year in total was 10th. Um, they've had they've had some bad years. He's had a better passing offense. I think he's been top 10 in passing at his peak. They've not run the ball well at all. I looked back at the Zimmer stats. There were a couple years where um, Zimmer had top 10 offenses, and it was largely built on, they had a top 3 rushing attack multiple years, and paired that with a top 5 defense many years, and they had an identity then of, we're going to be a really good defense, we're going to run the ball, we're going to control the clock. Flores has had good defenses in a couple years running now, but there's been inconsistency in the offense, and you can lay a lot of that on the quarterback thing, because not only, last year, taking the name JJ McCarthy out of it, you've got I guess he wasn't a rookie, but a guy making his first starts. That there's going to be a learning curve, but you also had the year Cousins tore his ACL, and you're dealing with Josh Dobbs, and you're dealing with Nick Mullins. And so even with that, like, Justin Jefferson had fantasy success in many of those years. And so I think the perception is that the offense is good, but they've not been a good offense. They've been at best league average. And he was supposed to be this offensive guru. Honestly, I think his biggest asset has been his ability to manage egos and manage the players. I think similar to, actually, this is very similar to Chris Finch, because Chris Finch was also supposed to be this offensive guru, and they've been the reason the Wolves have been good recently, in addition to Anthony Edwards, is not because of their offense. It's been because of their defense. And if Kevin O'Connell didn't have Brian Flores, I don't know where the Vikings would be. I think, we're losing in the first round. I think we'd have fewer playoff appearances without the defense, because the offense in totality has not been there. Justin Jefferson's had some of the best wide receiver numbers you could put up over Kevin O'Connell's tenure, but the running game's been atrocious the entire time. And I don't know what changes that. So um, I I think you're right. He's been given too much rope, but I'd be surprised to see him fired after this season, even with a mediocre season.
Yeah. And, you know, another issue I think is with ownership. And of course, by all accounts, the Wolves are great owners. They're willing to spend, they've pushed through great facilities. They're always at the top of that ranking for the players survey on the whole organization. They're always in the top one or two teams on there. But I think it's a big problem that they never allowed this team to take a step back. The phrase they keep bringing up is a competitive rebuild. They never want to be bad, but there were years they probably should have been bad and they would be benefited greatly from that now, like with higher draft picks and more cap flexibility. If you're never allowing anyone to take a step back and you want to win meaningless games so you can miss the playoffs and go 500, like last season, you end up with the 18th pick in the NFL draft. And more often than not, that's not a franchise changing player. Most of those players get drafted in the top 10.
And you compound that with a poor scouting department or a poor scouting GM or whatever you want to call it, that not only are they picking late, but they're also not ever hitting on those picks. And there are other teams that consistently are able to get value out of the draft. And part of that is having your picks. Obviously the Rams do things a little bit differently than other teams do, but even that, they're using their picks when they trade their first round picks for good players, and it's paying off. And then they hit on late round guys. They hit on
in the mid rounds too.
And that's the frustrating thing is you end up in this. If you never bottom out, and I use bottom out loosely because that could just mean winning 5 games or 6. But if you never take your medicine and you're consistently in the back half of the draft, or you're making dumb trades with picks, like you've never been a fan of the TJ Hawkinson trade, but they've had all sorts of trades where they trade a third or a fourth or a fifth for an edge rusher or a tight end or whatever, and then you just don't have those picks.
Or 36-year-old washed Adam Thielen. Let's get a 4th round pick.
Right. And it's because I think it's not just that they're not getting stars, which is understandable. That's hard to know, but they're also not getting quality depth players.
Yeah.
They have the cupboard's bare in terms of, if you go back to, even like outside of Jefferson and Addison, on the offensive side of the ball, Darrisaw is a great player. There's injury concerns now, but there's not a lot there. The defensive side of the ball has largely been held together by hitting on guys Brian Flores has identified as depressed assets that they can bring in. Maybe Dallas Turner is going to be,
but they gave up a ton for Dallas Turner.
Yeah, and they could have drafted Jared Verse, who now is going to waste away in Cleveland. But
Jared Verse is like at least proven.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
If I'm the Browns, I'm thrilled with that return on that trade.
Oh, absolutely,
because he's a young guy where. He could almost be a Myles Garrett in a few years, and he's been dominant.
If I'm Cleveland, I'm thrilled. I think that's where some of Kwesi's downfalls were, is he was this analytics guy, but it's almost like he got too cute with, the expected value of a draft pick, and it was about math and not about the player.
Yeah, and his draft day trades have just been disastrous. Going back to his first draft, when he passed on Kyle Hamilton for Lewis Cine, was just an absolute disaster.
And when you talk about now, we've spent some time talking about, was Harrison Smith going to retire? Who's the Harrison or Smith replacement? Who could be a Harrison Smith replacement? Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
Lewis Cine's not in the league. And I don't want to be flippant about it, but, we've had multiple high draft picks die in the last couple of years. And
Yeah.
that's a freak thing. It is what it is, but it's also like some of these guys literally aren't walking this earth anymore. And
Sure.
uh let alone some of them aren't in the league. And we don't know that Teasley's gonna hit on every draft pick. Nobody hits on every draft pick, but I think the hope has to be that the process is better and that we are able to identify talent. We're maybe a little more precious with our own picks than we have been in the past. And you sort of build the team that way through the draft, and then you supplement it with these key free agent guys when you know it's time. Like the Seahawks clearly identified that we've got a team here. Let's go all in. And they took a swing on Darnold, but having the cojones to not only do the Russell Wilson thing, which actually, the draft compensation they got from that and how poorly he did with the Broncos was a big part of how they were able to build the subsequent team.
Yeah,
But
totally.
also being able to get rid of Geno Smith, like you mentioned before, having the wherewithal and the confidence to know, we're going to trade in the good enough for trying to be better. And Darnold's stock was low after those back-to-back games against the Lions and the Rams to end that 2024 season in the playoffs.
Correct.
And they had the confidence to say, let's do it. This guy can sling it. We're confident in the rest of our roster. We're confident in our running backs. We're confident in our defense. The wide receiver. I mean, they swung for it, but it was the result of smart decision making, I think, everywhere along the way. And it wasn't luck. I mean, luck plays a part, but it was competence at
Yeah.
every step of the way.
But getting back to this competitive rebuild stuff, where I think Kwesi and KOC just had the blinders on of like it was always their plan to draft a quarterback, especially in that 24 draft, because everyone kind of knew for the few years preceding that was a loaded quarterback class. So they go all in going, we got to get a quarterback. I mean, rumors they wanted Drake May. The Patriots were never going to give up that pick because they
No,
wanted Drake May.
I think Kevin
And
O'Connell loved Drake May, but yeah,
yeah,
Patriots were never the Patriots, and I don't blame him.
correct. And
He's
I think they talked themselves into JJ McCarthy because they're just going, this is the plan all along. We got to draft a quarterback. And so they drafted JJ McCarthy. And you also, I mean, with this competitive rebuild, you put them in an impossible place because, of course, they didn't know they were going to win 14 games with Sam Darnold. So they go 14-3. Of course, they get bounced in the playoffs. We were there. Very depressing. But then you turn it over to McCarthy, and it's by all accounts it was a pretty loaded roster. Of course, they had some injuries early on that caused some issues, like on the offensive line and stuff. But you put him in an impossible place to succeed. Like he gets no time, In defense, neither of us are fans of JJ McCarthy, and neither of us really like the pick to begin with. But like you put him in an impossible place because he's got to
yes,
follow up the 14-3 season by Sam Darnold, and you just going to throw him to the wolves, and now they're ready to move on from him already. It's just,
yeah,
it's just
and
very frustrating how they handled the whole
yeah,
situation.
and I think I want people to know that I'm not a fan of his, but I also understand that he was dealt a very difficult hand, and I would love for him to be successful somewhere. I don't think it's going to be here. I don't really want it to be here. And part of some of this is going to sound dumb, and it's these intangible things, but a little bit of it is the circus that comes with him. And I don't know if it's just because he's a Michigan quarterback and they won the national championship, but it reminds me of like D'Angelo Russell stands in the NBA. It's like the dude's not that good, but he's got writers on Twitter, and I'm too online. I'm and half of this stuff is trolls or bots probably anyway. But there are members of the Minnesota Vikings media that are almost to an absurd degree, JJ McCarthy apologists, like to a fault. And that's what I don't understand. And then he's got, I mean, there are high profile JJ McCarthy people. Dave Portnoy from Barstool, Michigan guy, JJ McCarthy. Like he's got fans because of how big a deal Michigan football is. And I get so frustrated because people bring up all the time that like the haters are ignoring his last 5 games and he won. If he would have, if that end of that Bears game goes differently, he would have went 7-3, blah, blah, blah. It's like, first of all, I don't know how many times people need to hear this, but wins are not a quarterback stat. He has Brian Flores' defenses there. I don't care how many games they won in that last 5. Look at his stats. His stats are comparable to rookie Christian Ponder.
And he won those games when they're out of the playoff race already.
Like, has he ever thrown for more than like 225 yards?
Yeah, correct.
Like he's winning these games. It's like 200 yards, 1 touchdown. I don't know where the excitement's supposed to come from. And I'm not saying I think I'm buying too much into Kyler Murray because he's not JJ McCarthy, and I've seen Kyler Murray do fun things on a football field. I know Kyler Murray has flaws. I know that. I know that we wouldn't have him for $2 million or whatever if he didn't have flaws. The Cardinals wouldn't have got rid of him. We wouldn't have been able to get him for that. But I also know that at minimum, he's going to go out there and make some stuff happen.
Totally.
Like, and I do hate that we're giving up on JJ McCarthy this early. I do think that also shows some hypocrisy on Kevin O'Connell's part. And we've talked about this in a previous episode with his quote about how, organizations fail young quarterbacks more than young quarterbacks fail organizations. But I don't even think this is necessarily a quarterback controversy anymore. The fact that Kyler Murray's in the building, this is a foregone conclusion. Like,
yeah, by all accounts, though, publicly they're saying this is an open competition.
Well, but what else are they going to say?
That's complete. I think it's complete BS.
They're also, I think, Mackey maybe said this, but they're as a, put your tinfoil hat on, but I don't even think it's that much of a conspiracy. They need to try to maintain and or recuperate his value as much as possible for an eventual trade, because also if I'm JJ McCarthy, I don't want to be here anymore. You brought in Kyler Murray. That shows me that you don't have any confidence in me at all. Yeah. So either he's going to, everybody is playing the part, saying the right things, other than, he had some fiery remarks to the media during OTAs last week, but I don't really blame him. What are you going to say? Is he supposed to say, yeah, I'm glad that they brought this guy in, and, if I don't win the job, whatever. He's playing for his livelihood here. He's trying to win the job, but that attitude also, they've put him in an impossible position, but
he's going, does Cam Ward have to compete against like a veteran, like former number 1 overall pick right now?
Yeah.
Like Cam Ward, I won more games than Cam Ward is probably what he's thinking, but it's the nature of the beast.
And the Wilfs don't, for better or worse, they don't have the patience for this.
Yeah.
And right now it's unfortunate for JJ McCarthy and maybe for the long-term health of the franchise. But I think once Kyler Murray signed on that dotted line, that was the end of the JJ McCarthy era in Minnesota.
Yeah. And don't you think now Kyler Murray, obviously his stock has depressed. It didn't end well in Arizona, but Arizona by all counts is a terrible franchise, terribly ran franchise. So, that might actually be a place where the franchise failed the quarterback. Of course, Kyler Murray has some well-documented issues, that have been very public, but he does still have leverage, especially when he's getting that guaranteed money from Arizona that he can basically sign for the veteran minimum with any other team. He has leverage where he wants to go. I mean, I'm sure there is 5 or 6 teams that would love to have Kyler Murray on the veteran minimum. And don't you think that there was some kind of handshake agreement going, hey, publicly, we're going to say this is an open competition because we can't
Yeah.
just publicly give up on McCarthy this quickly. But it's your job to lose, buddy. Like, so sign on the dotted line, and you got a lot of weapons here. You got a great system. It's a great organization to play for. Like I said, publicly, we got to say this is an open competition, but it's your job to lose unless you
Right.
get injured or you're a disaster in training camp and preseason or whatever, you know?
And for him, he's looking at it like whether or not 2027 and beyond is in Minnesota, 2026 Minnesota gives him the best chance to put up numbers
Correct.
for whatever that next contract is, whether it's here or elsewhere. And
Yeah.
so he's also, I mean, he has advantages that JJ hasn't, being a veteran. And I don't want to belabor that point, so maybe we should get into, we talked about we were going to maybe take a look at the schedule. We're 40
Yeah.
minutes in already. So I don't, Chase, do you want to pull up that schedule?
All right. Perfect. So,
Thanks.
yeah,
Chase.
we'll kind of quickly go through the schedule, but week 1 and week 2, get into it right away. Packers at home, on the road on Bears. So I mean, really gives you an opportunity to set the tone for the whole season. But it does get a little bit easier after that. Am I right? You Bucks, Dolphins, Saints. They're kind of 500 teams at best. The Dolphins might be the worst team in the NFL. I don't like to see that the bye week is so early.
Yeah.
You hope for that to be kind of in the
Especially
last third.
with an international game later.
Yeah.
Not having a bye around that international game is a little rough. Who do you have winning week 1? I think we take that. At home.
I do, but
The start to the
Packers,
Kyler Murray area.
Packers, Vikings, it's always a coin flip. I feel like if we lose that one, we'll get it back at Lambeau. If we win it, we'll lose at Lambeau. That seems to be how usually it is.
The safe bet in this division is pick a split in some capacity. But
yeah,
the crappy part is it wouldn't be crazy to be sitting at 0-2.
Yeah, totally.
After 2 weeks, but
yeah.
So
but then 8 through 11, is kind of a gauntlet with at the Lions, Bills at home, at Lambeau, and then you got the Niners in Mexico City.
Oh yeah, that's a tough stretch of games.
I just like to say I'm over these international games. Like,
yeah,
can we play these freaking games in America, please?
Yeah,
like,
it's too much.
It's getting out of hand. I mean, there's just way too many of them now.
And the travel, the field conditions, they feel more like exhibition games than regular season games. But the fact of the matter is, they are regular season games, and they count the same as every other one.
Correct. And it just sucks to lose a home game. I know that the Niners luckily it is a 49ers home game. So it is to our benefit because this year we have 9 home games, 8 away games. So technically we have 7 away games and 1 neutral site, if you think about it that way. And the crazy thing about Mexico City is I heard it's in the same time zone as Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a little bit different for like one of these international games where you're not like,
and it's a night. It's not the breakfast game. Breakfast beers and eggs and bacon watching football.
Sure. And then,
it eases up a little bit, but that's that week 14 game is tough at New England. Is that a Thursday night game? Yeah, Amazon.
Yep. I think you're right.
This is actually a tougher.
Correct. Because you look at it like week 16, Commanders are definitely due for like kind of a bounce back year, and then the Falcons aren't bad. And, the Panthers could go either way. They could take a step back, or they, most likely they're kind of a 500 team maybe again. But there's no real easy games to end the season, Besides maybe the Jets, I guess. Week 17, we got the Jets.
Shout out Jeff Flacco.
Yeah. But Bears at home to end the season. Hopefully that's a meaningful one because, it just feels like the Bears are on the rise. It feels like the Lions kind of missed their window. They're kind of at the end of their window. Packers seem like they're kind of due for a step back with recent news. Just a total shame to see that happen to one of their best players. But
what are you gonna do,
Alex? I'm gonna spit out some NFC North quarterbacks tonight. If you can just give me kind of like a 1 or 2 word response, just kind of your thoughts on them today. Let's start with Jared Goff.
I'm gonna go game manager. Solid, not spectacular. Gets what's there.
Caleb Williams.
Dangerous.
You expect him to continue to improve this year?
I do. They became a pretty fun team to watch, and some of the throws he makes under pressure in high leverage situations are next level.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that having him in the division, I think, is going to keep us up at night for a long time. Now, as long as we have Flores, he's going to throw everything he has at him. But we've seen a history with all the teams in this division of it's kind of a punch for punch. Like we've seen Flores really stymie the Lions, and we've seen the Lions get the best of Flores. Same with the Packers.
And that's the thing with Ben Johnson, though.
Yes.
He's kind of a game changer for them. And he seemed to, especially his last 2 years with the Lions, he seemed to really have had Flores' defense figured out.
And so when you take that fact and then you look at the talent level of Caleb Williams compared to Jared Goff and what Caleb Williams can do, sort of when things break down and it has to be a little bit of backyard football, not to mention what he can do on schedule and when things are good, but also, the Bears have a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. So I think they're a dangerous team. He's a dangerous quarterback. So dangerous.
Yeah. And funny thing about a little side note, I'm married into a Michigan family, and they're all huge Lions fans. And I love them, but they're insufferable about them, as they would probably say to me about the Vikings. But, it's always about Dan Campbell. And I told them the last few years, I go, the real superstar in this coaching staff is Ben Johnson. And I was thrilled when he got a job. And then it was like, oh, shit, he's still in our division. So, yeah, that was kind of disappointing. But moving on, JJ McCarthy.
JJ McCarthy. Gone but not forgotten.
Chase, if you could take that schedule off.
Sure.
All right, thanks. And Jordan Love.
Overrated. I'm wrong on that probably, but I'm going to keep saying he's overrated until I die. His advanced stats are pretty good. He's not somebody that strikes fear in my heart in the way that Caleb Williams is going to.
Well, what's crazy about him is sometimes he's just on fire and he can't miss. And then he almost has that kind of reminds me of Kirk Cousins at times, where you just can make some of the most boneheaded mistakes and you're just like, what were you even, dude? Like, you're supposed to be a top 10 quarterback, and what the hell was that?
Yeah,
he can make some bad turnovers.
But when he makes some of these throws and sort of I don't know, he's got a lot of Rodgers in him. Like he kind of this off the back foot thing, and it ends up being an absolute dime, and you're just like, are you kidding me? But then also, I mean, he's another guy that's had a good back and forth battle with Brian Flores over the years.
Totally.
But,
occasionally Flores gets the best of him, and sometimes he gets the best of Flores. So,
But he's not a guy that I'm not scared of Jordan Love.
and lastly, Kyler Murray. What are your thoughts going in?
He's going to look good in purple.
Yeah.
I have I don't know if I could boil it down to one word. Hope.
that's
Hope.
a good thing to end our Viking segment. So let's get into a little bit of the Wolves off season. What do you think, Alex? How are you going to look back on the 25-26 season? Like, do you view it as a success? Like, what's kind of your general sentiment of how things went?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think pre-playoffs, if you asked me and really anybody that question, you would have said absolutely not a success. Um, they treated the regular season like it didn't matter again. Um, we had a great ant year, but then in the playoffs, especially in that Nugget series, they showed so much fight. Um, they also played well for much of the Spurs series, but really got outclassed over the course of it. And I think ultimately it was an important year that will probably be remembered as an inflection point because I think they are going to make some moves. I think this core, um, at least in regards to Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, and Julius Randle being a part of the squad, has reached its conclusion. And I think they needed to lose in the way they did in order for that to happen. Um, you could argue that making the Western Conference Finals last year was sort of gave them a false confidence in how good this team was. But I don't blame them for more or less running it back. Although, I think adding Ayo Dosunmu was a big move. He is an unrestricted free agent. They'll have to sign him, but I think they've got the inside track there. So I think you go forward looking at the core being Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, Ayo Dosunmu, Johan Berenjay, and the whatever TJ Shannon, whatever's left of Dante. I hope he doesn't have to be a cap casualty in a trade, but he's on a good contract. I think I'd love to see him remain a Wolf. I think he's going to attack his rehab. We saw Jason Tatum come back. He's been in contact with Jason Tatum. He had surgery right away. We'll see what happens with Dante. So I think ultimately it feels like a little bit of a wasted ant year. But I think it's important in the grand scheme of things that they were able to see how they measure up and definitively they are on a different lower tier than the Oklahoma City Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs in the West.
Yeah. And I think what's frustrating is it doesn't feel like they closed any sort of gap with OKC. If anything, it's gotten wider.
Yeah.
And not only that is you have another team in the West who, of course, the Spurs are kind of ahead of schedule. It seems everyone would kind of agree with that nobody really expected them to be here to start the season last year. So now you got two teams that are younger, have more assets moving forward, have more cap flexibility, have more draft capital to make improvements. And this year kind of felt like Ant got better and the team didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Jaden has improved, and
Jaden had an underrated, really good year, and I think we're going to continue to expect more from him.
Yeah,
but I think he showed he can carry a little bit more of the load on offense than he has needed to before. He's been the fourth or fifth option a lot of times, and I think he has the talent to be the third option on a team. Let's say, like if we go get a point guard or somebody, and so I think it's important to keep to keep him part of the fold, which is why we can get into some potential trade targets. I think at minimum one of Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert is going to be traded, if not both. And I look at it like they kind of have a few different paths to go down. One path is swinging for the fences and going all in and selling the farm for either Giannis Antetokounmpo or Kawhi Leonard. I think both those guys have downsides, not least of which is how much you'd need to give up in order to get them. And it would involve probably flipping players that we maybe don't want to get rid of, in addition to players we do want to get rid of, to other teams for picks to send to Milwaukee or Los Angeles. But you're also then left with, a thin roster of Ant and Giannis and Ant and Kawhi, and not a lot of depth. And one of the things I think this Oklahoma City and San Antonio series and the whole playoffs have shown is that depth is huge. And, Oklahoma City dealt with injuries to Jalen Williams and his backup. I'm spacing on his name right now, but they still were in it till Game 7. And part of the hell of playing against them is they just have this endless wave of athletic wings to run you ragged on the perimeter on defense. And, the Spurs are similar. So that's one path. I've seen conflicting reports that they're going to be all in on pursuing Giannis. And then today I saw one that they're not going to be in on pursuing Giannis. I tend to think that although Tim Connolly is a big game hunter, that's not the path they're going to go down. And so the other options, they all come with, the guys that they're trying to get rid of are Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert. Flawed players, players who have a lot of skills, a lot of talents, but they have flaws. And so the players that they're going to be able to get either for them or with other assets that they get from trading those guys to other teams are also going to be flawed players. So one of the names that's been brought up recently, Dane Moore and Jace Frederick had an episode on this last week, is Zion Williamson. From a salary standpoint, I'll just go back and say Giannis makes $58.5 million next year. Kawhi makes $50 million. Julius makes 33. Rudy makes 36.5. So there'd have to be some combination of one of those guys and another player in outgoing salary, whether it's to other teams or to that team, without getting into whether or not Milwaukee would want that or not. That's just the math on the salaries. Zion makes 42. So that's in the neighborhood. But Zion has a long history of injuries. So he's a depressed asset in that way. Kyrie Irving is another popular option.
I like Kyrie.
Yeah, Kyrie makes 39 million. Julius makes 33. I've seen outlines of deals where like Julius and other things go to the Mavs. Rudy Gobert goes to a third team, Charlotte, somebody who wants a rim protecting center. You get some picks or something there to throw to the Mavs. The Wolves get Kyrie and maybe Daniel Gafford or other things. And then you have your depth still. You have Kyrie Irving, who takes the ball handling pressure off Anthony Edwards, which has been part of the problem. But you have Kyrie. You keep Jaden, which I think is huge. You keep Nas. Gafford would be another center as you're continuing to develop Baron J. And I think you roll with that for a little bit instead of trying to mortgage everything. It kind of ties back into what we were talking about with the Vikings. We have some limited cap flexibility and limited draft assets. So if you continually go in, eventually the music stops and you don't have a chair to sit on. And I don't think that that's where we want to end up. And so I do like Kyrie. He's coming off an injury, but I think that's the type of thing we're more likely to see than Giannis. Ja Morant, he makes a little over $42 million next year. He's another guy that was bred up, obviously younger than Kyrie, I don't like the fit as much as Kyrie. He he played really poorly the last couple years. Obviously, the talent has been there, but I have questions about that one. Darius Garland's another guy, formerly of the Cleveland Cavaliers, now plays for the Clippers. He'll make just over 42 million. He's a guy that actually the Wolves have a history with. Gerson Rosas wanted to draft him in the 2019 draft, where they ended up taking Jarrett Culver, and I think we traded up to the 6th pick, and he thought that Darius Garland was going to be there, and then Cleveland took him out from under us.
Yeah.
But he's another, like, maybe less talent. He's less of a depressed asset than those guys. He just kind of is what he is, really solid point guard. I think he would fit in well on this team. If you could get him without having to give up, and if you're able to keep to sign Io, not trade Jaden and not trade Nas, and bring in somebody while getting rid of Julius, I think that's the needle they're trying to thread here.
Yeah.
And then the other one in that group, I've not heard as much recent chatter about, but he's sort of been brought up all season long, is DeJounte Murray. He makes about $33 million next year. Just looking at like who's close in salary to Julius that you could structure a deal around. Because I'm not married to the idea that both those guys need to go, meaning Julius and Rudy, but I think it's clear one of them needs to go, and I think Tim Connolly knows that we can't run this back. So there's some interesting options there. They all come with flaws because we're trading away guys with flaws. We don't have a lot of draft picks to trade. So it's all risky, but I don't think we can afford to have. I think Tim Connolly also understands that at some point Ant's going to go, what are we doing here?
Yeah. And I also think whatever route they take, I think it's key to hold on to that 2033 unprotected, that not to give up an unprotected first. And I think you'd have to in the Giannis trade. And I'm hoping, like with a Kyrie trade, maybe you wouldn't have to give that up. And I mean, the big argument for Kyrie is like we need a primary ball handler.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in our half court offense has not been good. And I think he immediately gives you a boost there. Of course, like all these guys, there's injury concerns. He's of course getting older, but especially if you could hold on to that 2033 pick. But I kind of have a fun ranking for you. I want you to rank these in most likely to least likely to happen.
Okay.
So the first option is Ant wins a title in Minnesota. The second option is Ant at some point without winning a title asks out in his prime. So let's say before he's 34 years old, he gets traded, kind of forces his way out of Minnesota.
Let's say before he's 30. Just
30?
Yeah. Right. I just 34, you're getting to the end of the prime.
Okay.
I'll make it a little more difficult for myself.
And then the last option is Ant stays his entire career, or at least through his prime years, kind of through 34 or so, but never wins a title in Minnesota. I want you to rank them from most likely to least likely.
Okay, this is tough because I'm gonna have to be real with myself, I think. And I'll say this as I wouldn't hold it against Ant or anybody in that position for giving your all to a team for, like a decade and then asking out. So given his status and everything else, I'm going to say it's most likely that he asks out prior, like during his prime, late in his prime, let's say, or like where Giannis is right now. Early 30s, still a lot of juice left. I think that's most likely. I'm going to say second most likely is that he wins a title with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'm going to say third most likely is that he plays his entire career here without winning a title.
And I think he seems to like playing in Minnesota, and I think he kind of likes repping more of a smaller market. And
and I only say that because I think in the current NBA, the likelihood of anybody winning a title it's difficult. There hasn't been a repeat champion in a really long time. Actually, I don't remember how far it goes back, but dating back to 2020 or something, that the champion hasn't even made the finals again in the following year.
Sure.
In a long time. So,
and we seem to have the most sure thing last year with the Thunder. We're going, God, they're so young. They're just going to get better.
It was a foregone conclusion. They're a machine. They're unbeatable.
Yeah, it was going. How long is their run going to be? Their reign going to be? Are we looking at another Warriors type dynasty here, where they're going to win 3 of the next 5? You know, and I guess they still could. But
speaking of that, what gets us there, Chase, if you want to pull this up, this is a map of every NBA team. As you are likely aware, and maybe some of the listeners are not, the NBA is adding a franchise most likely in Las Vegas, Nevada, and in Seattle, Washington. And because both of those teams are Western teams, a current Western Conference team would need to move to the East. There's been a lot of chatter. The 3 main suspects for that are the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Memphis Grizzlies, and the New Orleans Pelicans.
Alex, can I? Is my eyes serving me correctly? Are Memphis and the Pelicans a little bit more east than the Minnesota Timberwolves?
They are, and that's the main rebuttal people have when people talk about Minnesota. But that really discounts the fact that the Timberwolves are sort of on an island here when you look at the rest of the Western Conference. I mean, Denver's probably the closest team. Oklahoma City is far. Memphis is far. They're not close to anybody. They have the most travel out of anybody in the league. Whereas these teams in the West, they're not that far from the Thunder and the Mavs and the Rockets and the Spurs and each other. And Minnesota being in the East also sort of restores the natural regional rivalries that we have in the other sports. It's the NFC North with Milwaukee and Detroit and Chicago. It's some version of the AL Central, or the historic AL Central that included Milwaukee. But I think that makes a lot of sense. And I only bring that up. I think we're a long way. We're years away from the expansion actually happening and somebody moving. But their best path to a title might be being in the East, or at least their best path to the finals. And then you get to the finals and all bets are off. But I think that's interesting. And does Ant wait around long enough to do that? I don't know.
And I think their chances are better to get into the East if they're good, if they're kind of where they're at right now. Because I think that
the Knicks, after losing 2 games to the Hawks in the first round, like swept their way through the rest of the playoffs. Now, granted, Boston, Tatum came back from injury, and, looked okay, but not at 100%. And Indiana was without Halliburton all year. Those teams will be back; they'll be better. But the East is a lot more top heavy than the West. The West is deep. So I just throw that out there as maybe that comes into play. It certainly changes the dynamic a little bit, becoming an Eastern Conference team. And who's to say? I don't know for sure that it'll be the Wolves, and I don't know when that'll happen, but it's interesting to think about.
Real quick, Alex, while we still have the map up before Chase takes it down, do you think Michigan is in the Midwest? I mean, to me, looking at this map, it's looking a little bit more like the Middle East of America.
That's a great question. Definitely not a question I would get in a shouting match with anybody that I just met for the first time at a party. But I think here's the problem. People outside of the upper Midwest or the Great Plains don't think about North Dakota, South Dakota at all. People in North Dakota, especially eastern North Dakota, consider themselves essentially Minnesotans in terms of culture. And so I think you have this disconnect between what most of the country thinks about this and what people who live up here think about this. Because I think if you asked anybody who lives in the Red River Valley in North Dakota, the eastern border, they would say that we are in the Midwest. And I think that colors where we think the Midwest ends. Now, Michigan, I think I've been too harsh on Michigan in the past because I think in my brain, Michigan's further east than it is. I mean, it's really, you got Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. But when you start getting into Ohio and Pennsylvania and Kentucky, that's like Rust Belt.
Yeah.
So I think if I were to draw a map, and maybe we can do this on a future episode, I'll allow Michigan. I would like at Valley City, I would draw a line in North Dakota because west of there, that is the Wild West. That's more Montana, Wyoming, like rancher country.
Badlands, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so, I don't want to cause any fights, but
I disagree.
The other question is how far south do you go? How far south do you go? Because I consider Missouri to be the South. Missouri borders Iowa. I've been to southern Iowa many times. Southern Iowa is basically the South. Nebraska and Kansas are, to some people, bread and butter Midwest, as is Missouri, St. Louis. That's the Midwest. I think this gets into an urban versus rural debate too, because some of the rural areas in these states, you just have people sounding more Southern. But I think as a homework assignment, we should be prepared on the next episode to come with a map of what we consider regions to be the Midwest.
Well, I'll say this to kind of end this segment. I live in 2026, not 1880. If I lived in 1880, yeah, I could buy your argument that Michigan is the Midwest, but it's 2026.
Hold on.
They're in the Rust Belt.
I want to be clear. This is not my argument. I'm extending an olive branch. I've argued before that they're clearly not in the Midwest, and I'm saying Great Lakes. Where do you draw the line between Midwest and not Midwest? Would you say Chicago is the quintessential Midwest city? Like Chicago is the epicenter of the Midwest? Or is that Minneapolis? Or is that Milwaukee? Is St. Louis the Midwest?
I could maybe buy St. Louis.
I think we could all agree that Detroit for damn sure is not a Midwestern city.
No. I think it's everything aligns more with the East Coast than it does anything representing the West. So
it's more of an art than a science.
Yeah.
I actually, while we're here, we're going a little long. It's fine. Let's roll with it. Chase, if you want to pull up, I got one more tab to share here. Very recently, so on like June 7th or something, the Timberwolves are going to officially announce their new uniform rebrand. There was a leak recently, and this appears to be what the uniforms are going to be. Let me get your quick off the dome thoughts on these uniforms, Austin.
They're sick. I actually have not seen this, but definitely throwback vibes from some of all of their best uniforms. Of course, the KG era, early 2000s, and then kind of the beginning of the KG era. What was that? Late 90s, mid 90s vibes. I love it a lot, actually.
Yeah.
If this is real, I'm all in for sure.
These white ones are very clean. I like the blues. The only thing I don't like about these black jerseys. I love the trees. I love what they're doing there. This blue line, this blue trim line here
Yeah.
is a little bit bizarre. And I think it
Yeah.
like it takes away from it seems less aggressive. Like the throwbacks we wore in the playoffs this year. I have the Nas Reed one. I think the blue line takes away a little bit, but I saw somebody Photoshop a black undershirt onto Jaden, and it looked a lot better. But that's a minor nitpick. Like compared to the regular jerseys we have now, if this is our regular jersey set, this is a home run. This is
I think
fantastic.
the black one might be the worst because, like, go back to the black one, Chase. Yeah, so I would like it better if it spelt out Timberwolves kind of in an ode to the old KG one, just like the ones we wore in the playoffs and stuff.
And it would be a little bit different than like they all say Wolves. Like if that one was sort of this is your they don't do home and away in the same way anymore, but this is your home, this is your away, this is your alternate. It would be okay to have this say Timberwolves. But again, in my mind, that's a minor nitpick. Like this is a home run.
I do like that they're moving away from like that new era ones that they rolled out. What was that, like 7-8 years ago?
Yeah, the Jimmy Butler.
Yeah,
sailor suits.
Yeah, I'm over that logo.
Like these,
and everything,
these are so clean. These white ones, and they're so reminiscent of those throwbacks we wore when we beat Denver in 2024.
Yeah.
And I actually really like this. I have a KG jersey from, what this jersey is based on. I like the slight modernization of a classic thing, and then bringing in elements like the trees. I don't know. Arrow pointed upward. I think it's good stuff.
Totally. I think.
All right, Chase, you can get rid of that.
You got anything else, Alex, before we wrap things up here?
I do have kind of an interesting topic here. I don't know how to start this topic. I'll just say, are you a big user of fast food apps? Do you utilize coupons? McDonald's, Wendy's. What are you up on the app game?
I'm not, and I get annoyed anytime I go through a drive-through and they're asking if I ordered on the app. Pisses me off.
All right. Well, you might be missing out, and let me give you a little bit of fat guy wisdom here. Well, first of all, if you eat McDonald's at all, you need to get that app because you get points. There's rewards. There's some annoyances with it, but it's fine. But I'm going to put you on game here a little bit with Wendy's. Now, Wendy's, this isn't exclusive to the app. You could order this, but I do a lot of pickup orders. I think the biggest market inefficiency in fast food right now is hidden on the Wendy's value menu, and it is this. You can get a cheeseburger or hamburger, and it's the value menu version. It's not a Dave's single for $7 or whatever.
Yeah,
but
it's the little kid one.
The cheeseburger for 99 cents, $1. You can also get their version of the McChicken, which is a crispy chicken sandwich. So a chicken patty, not a chicken breast sandwich, but a chicken patty, 99 cents, $1. And so, in today's economy, I'm just trying to help people save money out here. You can have a decent lunch with several of these sandwiches for $2 to $5. Here's where I'm going to put you on game a little bit. What you need to do for $2 or $4, if you want two of them, you buy a 99-cent cheeseburger from Wendy's. You buy a 99-cent crispy chicken sandwich. You open them up. You take the bun off your cheeseburger. You take the bun off your crispy chicken sandwich. You kind of rub the bun on so some mayo gets left on the chicken. You take the chicken patty. You put it on top of the cheeseburger. You put that bun back on. And let me tell you, this is fantastic. This is the latest fat guy fast food technology that I'm giving you here. But for $2, you can't beat it. And we've had times
I can't mix red meat and white meat. Like I can't do it.
I need you to try it, and I need you to tell me what you think, because Well, that's my thing. I'm even embarrassed to bring it up. It's, I have deep shame about it, but it is what it is. But the price, like we've had nights where it's been a hectic day, we want to order food. You can get like 12 sandwiches and feed the family for nothing. And you go to anywhere else and it's not hard for a family of 5 to spend $40 at a fast food restaurant.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to help the people out.
No doubt. Well, for you guys still with us, we appreciate you listening to episode 3 of the Due North Sports Podcast. We'll try to see you guys again soon here in a week or two, and hopefully have some more updates for you.
Until next time.